You ready? Okay. So welcome, everyone. This is a workshop, so it's the informal meeting. I do see several council members here, but I note that are a couple of absences. So Ren Longno has an engagement at the school, and Justice is under the weather, and we'll proceed with the five of us. Chris, you mentioned the city attorney's on the line and John Clark as well?
Yes.
Okay. Hey, everybody.
Good evening.
So the first item we're going to pick up is on 6 Commerce Street. There's a proposed rezoning. John, you want to take us through that?
So, Mayor, this is Nick speaking. I don't know if John is on yet, but I can jump start us and start it off, and then John can certainly fill in some of the details. So the City Council, and in your packet is a request from the property owner, Hudson Todd, for the rezoning of 6 Commerce Street. Also in your packet is a memo from John that goes through with some planning thoughts with respect to the application. So this is a request from a property owner. The City Council has the legislative discretion to take no action, defer this to the planning board for a report and recommendation, further workshop it, or if you're in agreement, introduce legislation that would rezone the property as requested by the property owner. It's squarely within this council's discretion as a matter of planning and policy as to whether you wish to rezone the parcel. I understand the applicant is present to answer any questions the council may have. The request from the property owner is to rezone 6 Commerce Street, which is a 0.05 acre parcel with an existing 2.5-story building, from the current district that it's in, the R1-7.5, into the Central Main Street district, the CMS zone. And they've requested this because they would like to change the existing use, a single-family residence, into a commercial use. In their letter, you'll see they've indicated that they have interest from individuals who would like to use the property for a commercial purpose, and as they say, contribute to Beacon's Main Street corridor. In his memo, John Clark explains some of the zoning issues for the board's consideration, but at the end of the day, it's a policy question for you whether this should be changed from the current district into the CMS. And John, is there additional information you wish to offer?
No, I just, my memory is when we went through the zoning last time, created the transitional district and looked at this area in relative detail, the reason this is still in the R1-7.5 residential district is that it had single-family use at the time. And single-family dwellings are not a permitted use in the CMS district. Otherwise, it would be in the CMS district because all the adjoining parcels on that side of the street are in the CMS district. So that's the reason it is the way it is. It's non-conforming with the 7.5 acres, 7,500 square feet required of a lot in the in that district to the south. So it is a little bit of an anomaly, and I don't see any reason. I did lay out a few issues that might be considered. The fact that it will still be non-complying. It's non-complying now. It'll be non-complying with lot depth if it's in the CMS district, but otherwise in compliance. There's only room for 1 parking space on the parcel under the current configuration. So if some commercial use went in there, it would probably need a waiver or a variance. There is a section of the code in the CMS district that allows for the planning board to give waivers if there's public lots within walking distance, and there are at least 2, and in the future there'll be 3 when the firehouse lot comes on board. Public parking spaces available, and it does theoretically take 1 single-family house off the residential market. But it could also, under the CMS, be apartments. So depending on how it's used in the future, you could either lose a unit or gain a unit, or be consistent with what it is now. So that's what the memo shows. I thought that the application had some merit and is worth consideration.
John, can I ask a question? Why would a residential property be excluded from being included in the CMS zone when existing uses can be grandfathered? Like, people wouldn't be evicted from their homes just because it had been rezoned as CMS back in the day? If it was a single-family home when the CMS was created, you said that was the reason why it wasn't included?
That's my memory, yes, is that it was a single-family house, and single-family houses are not a permitted use in the CMS district. So when possible, you try to create districts that are in compliance with the use. So you don't have grandfathered unless it's for some reason necessary. And in this case, it was an adjoining residential district, so that's why it was attached that way. That's my memory, but it goes back a few years, and I can't say for sure.
Thanks. And are there other non-conforming properties in the CMS?
I'm sure there are non-conforming properties, but offhand, I can't think of any single-family homes in the CMS. There are a lot non-conformities because there's a lot of old, odd parcels along the Main Street corridor that don't have the same lot depth as required and that sort of thing. But I can't think of any single-family homes on the corridor.
Yeah, I'm thinking as well, and I can't come up with one anywhere.
Maybe the shop next to the coal silo?
That's not CMS, I don't think.
No. Do you have a map, John?
I have a small map, yes, that I can barely see.
I meant to put on screen.
Yeah, I'm looking in the 2017 comprehensive plan, and it does appear that there are a number of homes that I'm aware of that do fall within the CMS, and actually, but also says that what we're considering is actually the CB, not the CMS. So I know there was a more recent update to zoning, so I'm wondering if this is the most up-to-date map as well. And it doesn't get down to the level of parcel. It's more of a general overview map, so maybe that also would give us more detail. Because this would indicate, for example, along Main Street, everything between Main and Church is either CMS or PB, and it's not residential in its zoning, but I don't know if that reflects reality or if that's more what was needed for the comprehensive plan.
Ben, I'm just going to send you the Beacon zoning map. If you can put that up on the screen.
I also gave you and John permission, but I'm happy to share it.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm zooming in from a different device on which I'm at my laptop, so yeah. So Ben, I've sent that to you. You should get it shortly. While we're waiting for that, is there any other comments or questions? Or is there anything that the applicant wishes to say? If the mayor's fine with that?
Yeah.
I had sort of a 101 zoning question. My understanding is that we're not supposed to be instituting spot zoning, and if someone could break down for me what that means and how this is not that and what the difference is, that would be very helpful. Like Molly was trying to research it on my own, but since we have you all on the line.
Sure. So this would not be spot zoning because it's bordering and adjacent to the CMS zone. So you would, in essence, just be folding this property into the CMS zone. So you're just modifying the boundary line, and in doing so, you would find that it's consistent with the neighborhood, the community, and it's not at odds with zoning. Spot zoning, an example would be if you had in the middle of a residential property and in a residential district, and within that district you changed a use so that it was, if you will, an island unto itself.
When was the last time the city of Beacon changed zoning at the request of a property owner?
John, I believe you changed some zoning on Cross Street in West Church. Am I right?
Yeah, I don't recall.
So my recollection was on Cross Street in West Church. I think that occurred a few years ago, and I think the applicant was involved, right? Yeah, if you want to speak, that'd be fine, Joe.
So I think the change that happened there was as part of, I believe, a collection of other changes. So I don't think it was a single change made at the time. I'm not sure it's particularly relevant, but that building had if you walk around it, if you're familiar with the street and the neighborhood, you walk around it. It's kind of surrounded by very different uses than you'd normally find in the R175 zone. It had multiple uses over the years. Its most recent use, up until 2.5–3 years ago, was single family, but just for a period of time by the custodian for the adjoining properties. And that was before our ownership. He continued in residence and in our employment after we purchased the adjoining properties in 2016, 2017. With him having moved out, it really doesn't make sense to keep that as a single-family use. You look at it and you say, this belongs in either some combination of apartment use with a couple of smaller units in it, or it belongs in some sort of commercial use consistent with its immediate neighbors. It's the parking lot behind both the church and the parking lot behind the Bank Square Coffee Shop and the adjoining businesses.
So if you can hear me, I've placed on the screen the zoning map. Can you see that?
Yes, thank you.
But this is parcel access first. So you can just see it in City Hall over here, and here's the parcel parking lot, and then Main Street. And let me switch now to the zoning map, and this is the parcel we're talking about. So you see it's within the R1-7.5, and it juts out on Commerce Street to jump to the other side to include this parcel. The rest of these parcels are all within the CMS district. So it wouldn't be spot zoning because you would flatten the line out and bring it into the CMS.
And Mayor, I just want to say for the public record that the speaker is Joe Donovan, who's the owner of the parcel and of Hudson Todd. So if people are tuning in or this is a record, we know who that is.
Yeah, I've known this parcel for obviously a long time. It was in the ward I originally represented. It's always been an interesting, it's a two-story Second Empire mansard roof home on a matchbox lot behind Main Street. So, I think the uses make a lot of sense that they would be commercial. I think we would welcome office space there. We'd welcome something that would help in terms of employment along Main Street and bringing traffic. Having watched it over the years, I do recall it was the single family for some time. I would be surprised if that's an attractive place for that. And I think it's a far better use. So I'm for it. I'm okay.
Those dumpsters next to the building, which building are those related to? Those two dumpsters with that new cage?
Yeah. We're in the process of redoing that whole back section to better accommodate the services for the bank building, which was for 60 years a church, and the services behind the Bank Square building, which runs from 129 to 137 Main. So we're moving the trash containers into a fenced and landscaped enclosure on Commerce Street between 6 Commerce and the corner, so to make the whole place more attractive. And we're in the middle of a phased approach to just kind of improving the looks of the place so it functions better for its residents and the business owners.
Thank you.
This is another, 101 question. I share at least one of these concerns about removing a housing unit when our rental market is so tight. Are we allowed to make any sort of restrictions or conditions that it be an apartment above and a store below, or are we allowed to, as the mayor was mentioning, the potential of an office space, since we are concerned about job creation, to say sort of anything about what type of commercial use we would want? I mean, this all feels like very unusual, so I'm just getting used to the rules and restrictions.
Yeah, John and I have discussed this. Unfortunately, no, under zoning, once it's zoned within that district, it's able to use any of the permitted uses within that district. You can't do it as conditional zoning, that is rezoned and only subject to if they do X, Y, or Z. So they would not be beholden to do what they said here. It would be subject to whatever is permitted use within that district. But I presume we're going through this because they have something specific in mind.
Yeah, to kind of piggyback on what Paloma just said, I know one of the potential uses included in the letter was a cafe, and I know there have been other cases where businesses that are along Main Street but aren't Main Street facing, there's been some conflict with residents depending on the hours and uses of that business. So what I'm hearing is we can't zone for that, or the zone doesn't allow us to kind of be specific about the uses, even if it isn't facing Main Street. But is that something we could, through the building permit process, kind of help to control the hours? Or would that be something where, as a city council, we'd have to set it for all businesses in certain zones or areas if we felt that was something we wanted to make sure that residences weren't negatively impacted by businesses that might have evening events?
The building inspector would not be able to. John, does this require site plan approval?
If it transfers to a commercial use, it would require site plan approval, and then the planning board could regulate hours of operation, or at least during the seeker process, consider neighboring impacts.
Correct.
That it might have on the adjacent residential properties on the south side of the street. So there would be some level of control, but it wouldn't be able to say you can't have a cafe there. It would just say that the cafe could maybe have to close at 8 o'clock, or be careful about its noise, or have outdoor eating in the rear, or some other. You could use the environmental impact process to look at any negative impacts on residential uses in the area.
Thank you.
Would this rezoning trigger a public hearing?
It would. So the process would be, if the council were inclined to proceed, it would be the drafting of a local law to rezone the property, fairly straightforward. Referral of that local law to the planning board for report and recommendation from both the county planning board and the city planning board, and then there would be a public hearing. At that point, you can proceed to grant it, deny it, or just take no action. It really is within your legislative discretion as to how you want to proceed on the zoning change.
One more question. The sidewalks in front of this particular property, are these ones owned by the property owner? Are they owned by the city? Who's responsible for these ones?
I've not seen a survey, so I can't speak to that, but even if it were, it is a public sidewalk, so under the city code, it is the responsibility of the property owner. It's also something that during site plan review, that would be looked at, and if it needed to be widened or improved or connected, that would be something the planning board would look at and could condition approval on.
Yeah, it's sort of an iffy spot of otherwise good sidewalks on either end.
I walked by, it looks like they have been redone recently, but I'm curious to get the applicant's comments on that.
Yeah, we just, as part of just the renovation of the 6 Cross Street building itself and work that we're doing on the 139 Main Street building, which is the former bank and former church building, we're getting the trash containers out of people's way, so we're putting them in a fenced enclosure up on Commerce Street. We were putting a safer way for people to get into and out of the parking lot, so it wasn't just one way in and out of. So all of that was done with coordination with the city and the building and the streets, the highway department. And so all of the sidewalks and the curbs have now been redone from the stop sign at South Avenue up to the where the existing sidewalk and curb was in good condition at the juncture between 6 Commerce Street and 145 Main Street. So that's all maintains the width that the sidewalk is at South Ave and at the corner. It maintains it, and it widens when it gets closer to 145 Main Street just to match the existing sidewalk up there.
And that's why I put up on the screen is just a Google Earth view of the sidewalk that obviously is being modified based upon the speaker's description.
And the chain link fence is gone, as I believe, right?
Yeah.
So the next step would be for the council to decide if it wishes to proceed in that manner as I've described, by having local law drafted, introduced, referred to the county and city planning board, and then a public hearing convened.
I wish not to proceed.
I'd be happy.
On the count that I'm concerned about, people with buildings coming and starting to ask for new zoning. I'm just concerned that this is going to set a public precedent.
I'd be happy for it to proceed, but I look forward to the public hearing and seeing what the public says about it.
I'm interested in the public hearing, and I'm interested in written and formal input from the planning board before proceeding either direction.
Well, I think you'd have to go to a public hearing, so you'd have to move it forward to hear that. You can
Sure.
refer to the planning board ahead of time.
Sure, in whatever order.
Yeah.
Before I vote on this, I would like those two things.
And I'll agree, looking at it on a map, it looks to be, I take Dan's concern that I don't want to open the floodgates. The way the letter was framed, it seemed to be like, oh, they're getting interest from businesses, so it should be a business. And it also seems to be looking at a map, in line with what we as a comprehensive plan have talked about for the city as a whole, and the way that it seems to be, as kind of was mentioned in the letter, kind of in line with what we want for that side of Commerce Street. So I'm curious to hear the public's take on it, and also the planning boards in whatever order is appropriate to get both of those things true, because there might be nuances of this that I'm missing as well.
Okay, so can we refer to the planning board without putting to public hearing? Nick?
You can, because the public hearing would come after the report. So you can introduce the law, refer it, and not schedule a public hearing until you receive comments from the county and the city planning board.
All right, so how about we do that? Is that all right with everyone? Okay, so let's do that. So let's introduce it, and then refer it to planning and county, see what we get. If we care to proceed, we'll go to public hearing then, all right?
When you say introduce it, is there like a formal thing that gets drafted up? Because I know there was the letter, the request, and then John's response. Is there something else that gets created?
Yeah.
Yes, there would be a local law drafted that would show the zoning map with the proposed rezoning and just have some text to it. Not a big lift.
So
we would
time-wise, sorry, Nick, go ahead.
And we would work with Chris to make sure the applicant escrowed some money to pay for the city's costs and expenses for its consultants.
Thank you for clarifying that. So timing-wise, the draft local law would come to us at the next workshop and then be deferred. That local law would then be deferred to the planning board at their next meeting. Is that what we're talking about?
I would suggest, I don't know that you need to workshop it again, because it's really just redrawing the line of the map. There's no text to it. It's not like a substantive zoning law where we're talking about setbacks and things of that nature. So I think working with John, it would either be ready for this upcoming Monday's agenda meeting or in 2 weeks after that. I don't think you need to workshop it again, given the simple nature of it in terms of its review.
Okay. All right, so let's proceed that way. And whenever you all are ready, just bring it forward. And I think we'll just do, as soon as we introduce it, we'll just do a referral, all right?
Understood.
Okay. Everyone good?
Yeah.
Highland Place, there's a utility easement we need to accept apparently, right? Nick, will you tell us about that?
I will, yes. So this is with respect to a subdivision that the planning board has approved, and the applicant is now working through the conditions. One of the conditions that the planning board identified, and please let me know if you can't hear me. I understand I'm using a computer where the audio is not as good as when I call in from my phone. One of the conditions from the planning board was that the off-site utility with respect to storm drainage be dedicated to the city, and there is a collection point that was designed and reviewed by the city's engineer that places the piping on a small sliver of the public, of the private property. So part of the approval process before the project proceeds is that they need to get an easement recorded that allows the city to have the utility drainage structure on private property, and that is an easement granted by the developer to the city. And then once it is constructed and inspected by the city's engineer and staff, it would then come back to be dedicated to the city. So this is an acceptance of an easement.
This stormwater management isn't related to, sorry, I haven't been up on that property myself, but I assume there's no streams or any water bodies up on there, that's not related to this at all?
That is my understanding, Dan, that this is for the collection of rainwater that falls onto the ground. It's not for the collection of surface water or anything of that nature. It's just stormwater.
And is this easement along Grove Street, essentially? There wasn't a map with it. There were descriptions of points, north, south, east, and west, that I didn't take the time to decipher. So I wasn't sure, because it's also being split into 4 parcels, so I didn't know if that changed where the easement was or how it oriented to the property and the streets.
Correct. From speaking with Planning Board Counsel, my colleague Jennifer Gray, it is on Grove Street, yes. And I'm just looking to see if I can pull up the subdivision map, but I'm not readily finding it. I'll certainly make sure that's sent to the council so you can see its location. So then the next step would be for the council to adopt a resolution at next Monday's meeting, authorizing the administrator to sign the easement and coordinate its recording by the developer.
Any concerns? All right, so let's move forward with that. Is that right? Okay. Next one, a couple appointments, Chris, you're going to talk us through. One is Nick Ragucio, and the other one is Brian
Ragucio.
Ragucio, all right.
Yes, we have a position open for a heavy maintenance, heavy machine equipment operator. Nick has been with us since 2020 and is very skilled at operating the machinery, and we're proposing to promote him to HMEO from his current MEO position. And you have a memo from Mickey Manzi, our Superintendent of Streets.
Any questions, comments?
Can you remind me how long he has been an MEO?
For 2.5 years. Yeah. And when we do the promotions in the highway department, we actually test the staff on various pieces of equipment. So when they want to take a higher position, we actually give them a test to make sure they can adequately operate the machinery.
That's great. Was that a innovation from our HR director, or just?
No, that was an innovation from Mickey.
Great.
But it's fully supported with HR. Yeah. Hey.
All right, everybody good? You want to tell us about Brian Bacamo?
I do. So we've had a position open at the wastewater treatment plant of senior wastewater mechanic, and we had posted that job internally. We didn't have any candidates who would take it. So we have put it out broadly in the field, and the person who currently operates the Village of Rhinebeck wastewater system, which is a much smaller 2A system, is interested in coming here to work on our 4A system. The reason that's attractive is because in order to get a higher license, the higher the number in wastewater, the better the license. In order to get a 4A license, applicants would have to work in a 4A plant under supervision of somebody with a 4A license. So this is a really good opportunity for us, and it's a good opportunity for Brian.
And it looks like that's kind of how Brian got involved to begin with, that they were a trainee and then built up to getting their license, I assume, while
Yes,
they're
and had a
training.
lot of mechanical talents before that as well. So we're looking for somebody, he's both a 2A operator and a mechanic, which is a nice combination of where we're trying to go with our new hires. We used to really have a rigid line between a wastewater operator and a mechanic. And in this case, we have somebody who's going to be essentially the head mechanic who also operates the plant.
It sounds like, too, he has the computer skills to learn the new computerization system
Yes,
that's
so
being used as well.
we have had a very slow adoption of our CMMS, which is the computer maintenance system, and
Maintenance management system.
maintenance management system. Thank you. And he would really help with the uptake of that. There's just too many acronyms in this world.
Oh, I had to write it down. It's here in my
You
notes.
did.
I didn't just.
I
don't
wrote
just
it
know
down, but
that.
then I lost my notes. So
Will this position be connected to the rollout of our new water meters?
no, that's in a different department. The
Oh,
water,
right.
the water meters
Sewer
are
and water.
part of the drinking water system. Those are rolling out sometime in the next months. We've been acquiring the inventory necessary to do the job. We have maybe 500 meters in, and when we get to 1,000, we'll start the first round of meter MXU replacements. Yeah.
Exciting.
It is exciting, and it's just, we don't want to start before we have enough inventory in the, and know that we have more inventory on the way. So, but this will help with doing more routine maintenance. We're trying to move from patching everything kind of after it's had a problem to doing more preventative maintenance, taking care of things that we've fixed, like our secondary treatment tanks, our primary settlement tanks, which are being done now, our blowers, the Headworks building, and we're going to be doing a new dewatering technology at some point and moving from a belt press to centrifuges. So all of that, like we're investing a lot of money, and we want to take really good care of these facilities.
How long will this training period take to get up to the 4A license?
I don't know, but I know it's a period of years.
Okay, great.
Yes.
So we'll have them for years,
Yes.
hypothetically.
Well, and again, we try, as you see with other positions, we do try to cultivate our next directors and management from staff that are starting out at lower positions.
Definitely.
Okay. Everybody good, I assume? Why don't we go on to a proposed local law making South Avenue one-way temporarily during the construction of the central fire station. Ben, you going to tell us about that?
Yes, thank you. So some of the council members had asked that we refer this item over to the Traffic and Safety Planning Committee. At their last meeting, they did take a look at this proposal. I'll pull up an image here to go along with it. And they came away with a couple of findings that I wanted to bring to your attention tonight. It's all put in writing in the memorandum as well, but just for the record, they are generally in favor of this proposed law. They even thought that perhaps it would be worth considering at some point down the road making it a permanent change, although they noted that there is a potential concern with ambulance exiting from the South Avenue facing bays from the renovated firehouse. So it's possible that that would be incompatible with making this permanently one way. But in general, they were in favor of it. And they did make one recommendation to scale back the number of parking slots a little bit to accommodate for the apparatus turning onto South Avenue, and also to be aware of the fact that South Avenue does narrow at some portions, so likely wouldn't be able to accommodate parking on both sides and would only be parking on one side at certain portions of it. But in general, they thought it was a good proposal, added some valuable parking spots while the municipal lot is being used for the renovation project. And that was essentially their comments for you all.
All right.
So then whose job is it to note all of those spots and mark which
Good question.
spots
So
are not, yeah.
We're lining that up right now. You'll see signs that have been installed and they're covered because we were assuming we're going to move in this direction. We're going to be starting the firehouse project next week. So before we close off the lot to begin drilling geothermal wells, we needed to have replacement parking to offer the church. So we'll be, most of the signs are up. All of them will be up by the time you vote on it. After the vote next week, we will be painting these overnight so that the next day they're ready to go and we can close down the parking lot and begin the firehouse project.
And what outreach has been done so far to the residents along this street, if any, to notify them of?
We haven't. You asked for outreach to South Avenue School, and I did that, and they appreciated us talking with them, and they had no concern.
Cool.
And again, I think you're going to, the concern you're going to hear is about noise, because we're going to be doing some rock removal on the north part of that. Again, I know it's going to be a bit of an inconvenience, but we'll try to get through it as quickly as possible.
One thing, too, that I brought up in the Parking and Traffic Safety Committee meetings, just to say it here, too, is especially if there are going to be fewer spots along South Avenue because of it narrowing at some points, if there's any consideration to also striping stalls along the north side of Beacon Street that goes sort of around the church property before you get, however far down it can go towards 9D before you get to the parking lot. I'm not sure what access is going to be needed for large vehicles, but they didn't think the south side would be good because there are residences there and they have driveways, but maybe the north side.
On the north side, a lot of people park on the north side when there's an event down there.
Right, so maybe, as generally when you have stalls, A, it encourages people, and B, it makes it clear how to park to get the maximum number of cars there.
Yeah. We'll look into that.
And so you have signage for this too, like one-way signs already? Yeah, okay.
And no left-hand turn signs, like as you come up Beacon, and no left-hand turn sign as you come off Main Street, no left-hand turn sign.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great.
If we wanted to consider potentially also, at least temporarily, changing the direction of traffic on Commerce and/or Cliff Street, would that be a separate thing we should consider, or kind of wait for recommendations around that?
Yes, because this is really time sensitive. I'm right up against the start of construction season.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was also interesting to hear from the applicant for 6 Commerce that sounds like they're going to maybe, because they've paved behind their other property, to actually have that parking lot be, you can pull all the way through and exit onto Commerce, is what I was understanding from what he was saying. So that could also help alleviate some of the issues that we might, or concerns that we had about people backing up onto, back onto South, if that's a one-way street, so.
Right.
Great.
Any other questions, comments? All right, we move forward with that. And the next item is we're picking up leaf blowers again. I guess, Nick, you're going to start us up?
I am, Mayor, so good evening again. In your packet were 3 items pertaining to this topic: the Conservation Advisory Committee memorandum regarding leaf blower regulations, which have been updated, our firm's memo from March 15th, 2023, which in essence was a decision tree that was rewritten to reflect the decisions discussed during a prior meeting, and then at your request included was a draft local law to establish seasonal limitations for leaf blowers. So these are the materials you had requested. I think you want to have some policy discussions about the scope and the intent, and I think the need for this law. I'm here to answer any questions you may have on the draft local law, but I think the discussion point here is how do you want to proceed? I think noted at a prior meeting, given that we're in the season we're in, you're not going to adopt this immediately. It's not an immediate concern, but it's something that you wanted to revisit. So I'm going to be guided by your discussion.
Yeah, if I may. So I suggested originally that we take up this issue, and to some extent, my colleagues have seen this as something that I'm advocating for, because when I was out, you guys postponed the conversation and waited for me, and I appreciate that. But I have, I really strongly believe that that leaf blowers are in fact a public health risk, and that need to be addressed. At the same time, I'm okay, based on things I've heard from my colleagues, from my constituents, and from local businesses, that we can approach the topic in a different way other than legislation, if my colleagues would be open to advocating for a way of educating the public about leaf blowers, but not just about leaf blowers, about what we do instead of using leaf blowers, because we're using leaf blowers instead of rakes for leaves, which we shouldn't be raking up anyway, and the grass clippings, and let's be honest, the clock is ticking on lawns. It's just unproductive land, and it's not good for the environment, lawns. So I think people in Beacon should be open and should listen to new ways of gardening, contemporary ways of gardening that are more in keeping with the natural world. And so if there's not an appetite for legislation at the table here, I'm okay tabling this, but trying to address the issue through other means, particularly an education campaign. I just want to put that out because of the discussion that we had a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, I appreciate the CAC's memo being put back in to the agenda packet, because there were a lot of suggestions in it alongside the policy itself around information sharing, around utilizing buyback programs, which is not something that I think the city itself should fund, but I think would be an important complement to rolling out a policy like this. But of course, like most industries, it's something that the landscapers themselves are doing what somebody has asked them to do specifically. And so I think putting the onus more on property owners to consider alternate landscaping, and less on the people operating the leaf blowers themselves, could be a more winning direction.
I appreciate you bringing that up, Dan, and we'll kind of echo Paloma's sentiments. I'm curious, maybe this isn't a thing to know tonight, but when it comes to putting education towards that, if there's any amount of funding and or staff capacity that would go into some of the suggestions that the CAC made around education, and should we consider that when we consider the budget for next year? Is that something that there is room for, we want to try to make room for? I also saw, and I have no idea where it is, that there is, and maybe it's been going for a while, there is New York State legislation around a state level buyback program, or a rebate program for electric leaf blowers, which is part of, I think, the economics of making this work that other states have done. And so that is something, I know we've done resolutions in support of different pieces of state level legislation in the past, so I'm wondering if that's something too that I would certainly be open to supporting, so that there is a viable path for people who may want to consider this, and that extra incentive will help them get where they want to go. And I appreciate that the state itself seems to be pointing towards encouraging people to shift some of their patterns, like with other things that are gas powered and they want to move to electric. So I feel like that's in line with both where the state is heading and where, as a city, as a council, that we support.
Right. I don't know that I could get behind that rebate program, because I think that the electric leaf blowers also create a lot of noise, which is a public health concern. I was very supportive of including the electric leaf blowers in with the gas leaf blowers, because noise is the primary issue. So I don't know that I would really want people to start getting more leaf blowers and getting a discount from the government to get leaf blowers.
Yeah, I know this was a topic a while back, but the electric leaf blowers are significantly quieter, but still in a range that can be harmful.
But because as the batteries get stronger, the leaf blowers are getting stronger and louder.
Right.
So the
Right.
technology is evolving to catch up with the noise that gas makes.
Right.
So.
In terms of capacity, I would let others at this table answer that, but we'll note that the CAC explicitly offered to prepare a short presentation on non-leaf blower management of lawns and yards, and I think allowing them to move forward with that would be a good direction.
I agree with you, Dan, that I think the education regarding gardening in general is apt, and I had reservations about identifying leaf blowers as the only problem. I think it's ultimately, a weed whacker is pretty damn loud as well, electric or gas. But so I think education, in terms of limiting all the uses of all this equipment would be more appropriate. And I would hope that the CAC could help us draft some sort of pamphlet or something that we could include on the website.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting direction. I mean, there must be existing material as well. We don't have to necessarily draft something from scratch, right? I think it'd be about sourcing the right information and then figuring out how to disseminate.
And we can ask Cornell Cooperative Extension what they have, and maybe they can help as well.
Yeah, and I like that, because the hard part in this area was there were just a lot of kind of compromises to kind of get around stuff, and we had hours limitations and timing and
exemptions.
But then the city was going to be able to do it, and then parcels over an acre. I prefer that approach, and it actually may get at the problem in a better way in the longer run, right? Because I think there are things that will change over time. So I'm interested.
I think it depends on what we do. I think when we have an event, say we're going to have maybe an educational session about ecological gardening, permaculture gardening. It's the people who are interested in learning who know about it will come. And if we put out information to people so that they can't ignore it, then more people who are interested but are not informed about an event would be able to access it. And this is one of the reasons why I'm really in favor of mailers, despite their cost. What's really good about mailers is it's on the person who receives the mail to say, I'm not actually interested in that. I say, and I don't wish to read that. But people who might be on the fence and be like, oh, I do want to learn about this, have the information in their hand and can access it and take action. So I'd definitely be interested in doing some kind of mailer around, what are our laws related to, keeping up your property, and here are some ways that you can keep up your property in an ecological fashion.
Yeah, I think it's definitely focused on the sort of positive alternatives and sort of the possibilities of alternative, quote unquote, alternative land or lawn management. And I know that we talked through the reasons why the city itself couldn't be a leader in terms of stopping the use of leaf blowers. However, I'm curious if they're on the flip side, and Chris, I feel like in many ways you're already doing this, the city could be a leader in those alternative land management practices. I mean, I know that you're already planting trees. We have a pollinator pathway in front of the Waste Management Center. There are, I think, ways in which we're already moving in this direction, but if we can be, thinking about or looking critically at our own lawn practices. I know that there's a reason why Memorial Park is mostly lawn, and that is because that supports the recreational uses that our community has asked for. And I know that we have already invested in the We Play Woods. There's a cloud garden. There's a blueberry area. But maybe it's even just pointing to these choices that the city has already made and is already being a leader in, at the same time that we are encouraging others to use it and to do it in a way that, as Dan is suggesting, is proactively getting that information out.
And we've done that to a limited extent and can see how much further we can take that. For instance, last year, I had our crews not mow Hidden Brook field other than just like a pathway through it and a perimeter path that circumnavigated it. We're exploring currently with an intern whether we can get rid of that lawn and establish a community garden. Very, very, preliminarily. But we're looking at a feasibility study. And we continue to try to take more and more of the lawn in front of the wastewater treatment plant and transform that. Other things like the Green Teens program has been really great at this, and then you have them planting a lot of permaculture stuff over at the West Center Street site. So as we can, we'll try to fill in. We just filled in trees at Memorial Park because there was like an area that really got hot during the summer. So every year we're going to try to increase what we do in terms of trees and plantings. Susan Tucker, who is here, is responsible for a lot of the beautiful plantings around here now that we have in lieu of lawn. So we always are looking to try to expand that, but again, we can do more on that. Yeah.
Was there, I don't know if it went anywhere, but then you have an interesting potential project at the solar field?
Yeah, well, we have sheep coming to the solar field to try to pilot whether or not we can do non-motorized. We don't do the management of that. BQ Energy or Solar Beacon is responsible for the maintenance and owns the solar panels there. They approached us about a pilot to allow sheep to manage the vegetation there. So we actually they did a contract which gives us the absolute right to cancel the program if things go sideways. We are trying it, and I am trying to parlay that into getting additional solar panels installed there. It seems that when we built that out, there was a regulatory limit on the number of kilowatts that could be installed. That has been raised, and there's actually physical room for about another 100 kilowatts of installed solar. So in exchange for the sheep, I'm trying to get us more solar panels too. So yeah, we're trying to be innovative, and we've even looked at, do we really need to mow the lawn every week? And I've raised that question. For certain fields, the answer is definitely yes. The ball fields really require that. Hidden Brook, probably not. We will try to keep moving in that direction.
They may have done the same thing with Hidden Brook this year. I was driving by and it looked like they mowed only a part of it.
Yeah.
One thing to note, though, is when they didn't mow last year, a very aggressive invasive species thrived in that garden.
What is it, barberry?
I don't know. My wife was over there, and she said, "Oh yeah, no, you guys got to mow that because there's bad stuff in there." Okay. So I can get back to that.
At the end of the year, they're supposed to cut it down because otherwise you get all kinds of invasives like multiflora and barberry.
Yeah.
Okay.
Dan, do you have interest in following up with CAC? I don't want to put this on you to continue to carry the ball.
Of course I did, yeah.
Okay, great. Yeah, I would love to hear from them, particularly if there's some specific support, be it in the budget for next year or something else that they think like, oh, actually, this is something else that we could be doing along these lines.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would be curious if there are budget implications of their recommendations as we head towards the next year. I don't think it would be in the next agenda item, but a regular budget.
Okay. Yeah, we can look at it. I mean, I'm reticent on mailers, because once you start the process, I could think of hundreds of things to mail on. So that one I'm a little reluctant on, but, general education campaign, there's lots of less expensive approaches to, communicating. So let's see. Shall we go on to the capital program and bring Susan up?
We have a chair for you here, Susan.
I'm glad you didn't say hot seat.
It's the money seat.
If I could just give you an update. So we presented the capital program to you last week, which is a 5-year capital program covering 2024 to 2028. The next step in that was for us to take your feedback and make changes. So you'll recall you asked for the sidewalk funding to be extended, not just for 2024, but for the 4 subsequent years. We did add that. What Susan has come with tonight and is in your package is a financing plan to show where this money would come from. And again, to remind people that didn't see the earlier presentation, we've limited the capital budget essentially to a few items that we really need, and then the additional money that we needed for the firehouse project to be completed. So we're proposing all of this for 2024, and I'll have Susan talk about the financing on that.
So as Chris mentioned, we did add the sidewalks, the $500,000 to each year in the 5-year capital plan. That was the only change that was requested. So the draft capital program from 2024 to 2028 stays the same besides that. With the financing plan, we are proposing to use of the $5.6 million that we need from the general fund. We're going to use $4.8 million from general fund balance. $800,000 is grants from other, it's from CDBG, DOT, which is CHIPS, and I think we're looking for some funding from maybe some Jonathan Jacobson's office, right?
Yes.
Hopefully.
Well, we were just going to say member item, but we're
hopefully
working on that.
So we're looking for $800,000 in grants and proposing to use $50,000 from the Recreation Trust Fund to cover parks items. In the water fund, there's only $100,000 of expenses proposed, and we're going to use fund balance to cover that in the water fund. Of the $1.9 million in sewer fund that we're proposing to spend, $100,000 would be coming from fund balance, and $1.8 million would be we would authorize debt for. This is a big chunk of fund balance to apply $4.8 million, but we've had some steady increases in our fund balance in the last couple of years with our conservative budgeting practices. And so we're proposing to use or cover the additional cost with the firehouse in total from fund balance. This would we have a unreserved general fund balance of $11.8 million, and this would bring it down to a little over $6 million, and that would still keep us within the range with Moody's of maintaining a fund balance that they like to see, so we won't lose our bond rating. Also, each year I try to add a little bit to fund balance by not spending our full expenses, and we have some one-time revenues, like last year it was mortgage tax. We went significantly over. With sale of property, sometimes we have a one-time surplus, so we try to bump up our fund balance for investments in our future, to fund future capital plans.
And then you had also asked us for the list of milling and paving, which are now included in capital program. In your packet, you have the proposed 2023 milling and paving list. That's conservative because we might still add 1 or 2 additional streets, but we're trying to figure out how much we're going to need to spend on the ADA curb ramps. When we use this DOT funding through CHIPS, one of the requirements is any of the curbs adjoining those roadways have to be upgraded to ADA standards. So the, the well-sloped areas with the detector pads that you see in our newer intersections, those have to be installed all along the way. And we know, like along Wolcott, there's 3 or 4 just in front of the Beacon Housing Authority, between there and South Avenue.
They don't get installed unless there's a sidewalk, is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah. Only if there's a sidewalk.
Correct. Yeah.
It looks like Beekman Street, which is a significantly sized street, is the biggest one on here. I assume there's not planned to actually install any additional sidewalks along Beekman. It would just be whatever needs to be curb cut along the existing sidewalks. Is
Yes,
that correct?
at this time, you do have a plan from the county from some years ago about putting an additional sidewalk on the north side. At some point, we could go back and look at that. It's just, that's a huge project.
Yeah.
What we will be doing is putting a ramp where the one crosswalk that goes down to the station doesn't have a curb.
Yeah. I believe there's a parking spot over that crosswalk.
We're also removing the parking spots around that so that pedestrians are visible. We have been in touch with Metro North. When we do Beekman Street, they will be responsible for repainting the parking areas. We will take care of the crosswalk, and we'll make sure that that crosswalk is no longer parked upon.
Great. Similarly, and I don't know how much is this responsibility of the developments that are going in, because part of it was talked about them, but the intersection of West Main and Beekman too, to make that crosswalk, if there's restriping that can be done to meet it, to be like our Main Street crosswalks, to be the more visible kind that don't wear out, that would be great.
Yeah, those are
as
called
well.
the Continental.
The Continental.
They're the lines,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
they wear better because you don't have
Right,
a cross
you're not-
line
yeah.
that gets run over.
Yeah.
So West Main and Beekman?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because that's also where people sometimes are required to cross, because that's where the sidewalk ends on the east side of the street. Or west side of the street,
I'll
sorry.
have Mickey look at it.
Yeah.
Just a question about, on Beekman, could we paint a bike lane on Beekman? It seems wide enough, at least, what's that, north of the station entrance? I know going south and going, south around Dia is a little tight and dangerous, but perhaps a bike lane, if it would fit, are we allowed to paint it, or does it have to be approved by the state, or what are the guidelines around adding a bike lane?
We could paint it, and it was actually, there was one bike lane that was proposed as part of the county study, which was done in 2017 or 2018.
Yeah.
And what they suggested was a bike lane on the south side of Beekman going uphill. And the thought process that the county planning department told me was that it's, you're going at a slower pace uphill, you're probably less stable, that's where you would want a dedicated bike lane. On the other side, would you just be in the lane because it's a lot easier. If we were to do that, I would hold off on paving Beekman this year. I think we can do one of two things, and I'll take your lead on it. We can repave it and kind of put back what's there with a few modest improvements, or we could hold off and then do a better planning process to look at the bike lanes. I'm a little uncomfortable doing the bike lanes without having a traffic engineer go back and really nail it down, so that I don't put a bike lane in a way that then somebody says, well, you put a bike lane here and it caused a conflict with a vehicle at this location.
So, we don't want to create a safety issue, and we don't want to put it off. I don't think so.
Yeah.
I guess I'm asking, whenever we're going to pave a major corridor, I'm probably going to ask that question, because I'm getting a little antsy for bike lanes in Beacon, and the public is too. And so I'm just looking for opportunities where we can put them in, and hopefully at low cost. But
I think
the paving wouldn't preclude us from doing it later.
No, we might have to restripe though.
Mm-hmm.
So it would be my preference would be to do it all at one time. I'm not sure how you'd have to shift your lanes to do that for a bike lane. But if you're going to do that, you would want to take a more comprehensive look and add sidewalks too on the north side, which is what the county proposed.
I mean, I'm not against waiting. I don't know when 16
Yes.
West Main and Edgewater are coming online fully, so I feel like there's going to be a lot of extra stuff going on around at least that part of Beekman, so I'm not against, and we have this county study, so I'm not against necessarily.
We can find other roads to do if you want to hold fire on.
Yeah. The one thing is that crosswalk with the parking space in it, it would be great if we could do something with that this year, just to make it a little less hazardous and dangerous for all the people who walk up, like the one across from Ferry Street. But I'm not familiar. I don't drive along Beekman that often, so I know Dan and others on the council commute more, so I feel like, and I walk down there, so I'm
we could easily hold this off and then, bring that plan up maybe next year when we have a little bit more bandwidth and look at whether or not it makes sense to try to design that out.
I think it's your ward, right, Molly? What do you think?
It crosses over my ward and Ward 2. Yeah, I feel like there's some. I'd be curious for you to bring us back to Mickey and get his thoughts on, because he's the one who proposed it and has been talking about it. So, what are his thoughts about?
Well, he proposed it because I identified that it was one of the gateways that people come to the city. You come and you walk up, and the pavement quality isn't great. We've made some improvements down there. You'll see we repainted the Fishkill Landing sign. I had them take down a bunch of dead trees. On Red Flint Drive, we planted a whole bunch of new trees. I had them move a hydrant out of smack in the middle of the sidewalk. I don't know how they get in the middle of the sidewalk. And I just thought that absent doing a full rebuild, that was kind of a logical next step in fixing up. But I'm also not, we can retool that and then do a bunch of other streets. And I don't think it precludes us from going back and fixing that sidewalk, that crosswalk that we've highlighted as an issue.
Yeah, I think, my instinct right now is it's probably better to do it, and we can do a more comprehensive look at it. There's more bandwidth, but as I say, I don't, aside from representing it and knowing that there's stuff coming online that would affect the West Main part of that Beekman, I'm curious to hear if others have any strong thoughts either way, or just thoughts, even if they're not strong.
Yeah, I'd rather be comprehensive and do it correctly, right? And I think we have time. There's plenty of streets to do.
And we have a lot of other streets to do.
Right.
This is not going to be an issue.
I have a sneaky feeling there might be a funding source there somewhere too.
Yeah, it's just we haven't. I was hoping to be further along on Fishkill Teller Avenue by this point in my life. Once I was getting through that, I was going to go back to the Dutchess County Transportation Council and see if there was funding available to implement the Beekman study. Yeah. It's hard to ask, though, when you've had money for 21 years and you haven't spent it.
Yeah, okay. Everybody good?
That's great feedback, thank you.
Yeah.
I only had one other thing about the capital plan, and I noticed that the hybrids are the interceptors for the police department are 75,000, and in the plan, if I'm correct, the full electric were 85, and I was wondering if there's appetite.
Oh, I can field that.
To go that extra 10,000 and go all electric?
They're different cars. So we don't have, the ones that are all electric are used by detectives, and they're not marked cars. And they're used in a very different manner than the patrol cars. The only currently available police package for us is the Ford Interceptor, which is made in a hybrid. So when they come up with an electric version of that, that's something we would readily adopt.
So this is about putting all the technology in the front and just outfitting it as a police car?
Yeah, it's just not. And even when we buy these cars, there's a cost from NICOMCO to upgrade them with the certain lights. Sometimes we need to put a cage in the back. Again, for the detective cars, they don't get the the wear and tear of the patrol vehicles. So anything that's not a patrol vehicle, we look at all electric, and the cost has gone up on all of these. New cars have skyrocketed. So we're going to be slow to replace cars. We might, instead of having them for 8 years, have them for 9 years, and try to keep them well-maintained so we're not buying as many new cars in the next year or two.
The one thing I'll note is there was an article in the local news on the city of Poughkeepsie's bond rating. They're getting close to investment grade.
Oh,
Yeah.
good for them.
So they might go above triple B or something. And that's because they've been reducing their fund balance deficit, right?
Right.
They were in the
right.
other direction. They were 16 million in the red
Yeah.
less than 8 years ago.
Mhm.
And the sales tax deal, they got a upfront payment of $3 million. They didn't get more money. They got the same share that we did, but they had the option of taking the money sooner and getting a reduction in the out years,
Mhm.
which they did, and they just put it to retire negative fund balance. They're down to about -3.
I'm surprised they even went up with a deficit.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, good for them.
We're not in that position. We're in the
No.
other position.
Mm-mm.
But I will say the mayor allowed that. We could have said, no, that's not part of this deal, and he allowed that to help the city of Poughkeepsie.
Yep. No, as part of it was, we were comparing notes. They'd agreed on kind of a formula, and then it was
Mhm.
like, well, I need something for the city,
Right.
and that was the arrangement.
And it
which
was
is-
kind of cool to see the cities stick together.
Yeah. So.
Well, I'm sorry, also know for a couple of years when they were budgeting, they were applying fund balance they didn't even have.
Yeah.
So you can't do that. So if you're in a deficit, you can't say, I'm going to use fund balance to offset the cost, because it's not there. So we're fortunate that, sometimes we don't have to use all the fund balance that we appropriate, so that's good.
Okay.
So any other questions on the financing plan or questions for me tonight?
I have, probably not a question for you, more for Chris, but I'm thinking of the future of Maze Hook and Ladder, once it's no longer needed to house all the equipment and firefighters that it is right now. Is there any expectation that they'll be, we should be planning to make a decision on the future of that in FY24, that we should be talking about that as part of our capital planning for 2024, or that's really not, and if we did anything with it, it wouldn't be until the following year?
Yeah, I'm thinking it's next year.
Right.
Um,
We will be
Okay.
talking about it in 2024, but it would be 2025
that we would then.
Optimistically, we wouldn't decommission the building until October of 2024.
Okay.
And to give you some perspective, we decommissioned Beacon Engine back in December of 2021, and I'm still negotiating how to settle that, and hoping to bring you something soon on that.
Okay. Great.
We have looked at, I would want to look at Maze Hook and Ladder as a potential option for a city hall relocation. Our city offices are very cramped here.
Yeah, I was thinking of things like that too, and just didn't want us to be delayed by even a couple months because, we're actually still in 2024.
No,
if we-
I think we could line up some design money, just to have somebody go and do an assessment.
Mhm.
I'd be comfortable doing it next year. I think you have time.
Okay.
And again, I want to see like how quickly we actually get out of that building.
Right, yes.
So
Yeah, we only did the shovels today. Let's get a little further along, see how it's going, make sure it's on track.
we're hoping you come back tomorrow and finish the job over there with the shovels.
There you go.
We did our groundbreaking today on the firehouse project.
The shovels had been painted gold, all right?
Sure were.
All right. I think, Susan, you should go home.
Okay, thank you.
So our next step is to set the public hearing at next week's meeting. So at the meeting on the 12th, you'll be setting a public hearing for the 26th. After that public hearing, the following meeting, you are able to adopt it. And we just need to adopt it by the end of July, so we still have good timing.
So we have one final item, which is an executive session item of personnel. So can I get a motion to go into executive
Thank you.
session for personnel and do no further business and go home.
Motion to go into executive session to discuss personnel and do no further public business thereafter.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, thank you all. Have a good evening.
Record.